One of the great things about this trip for me in Washington is reconnecting us to a belief, an ideal, or a paradigm that I think is important to this country. And it's about believing in ourselves and believing in the ideals that we all hold dear in this country. I believe that the people in Washington, D.C., the vast bulk of them, are connected to those ideals. And when you bring young people and set them in front of them and they're paying attention, they're interested, it opens something up that's really important. It's a sending forward of information from one generation to the next about what's important and what's valuable in a culture, what holds a culture together.
We're kind of learning how to balance, like how to, first of all, make our own values, and second of all, like understand the world, basically. And so, like, it's kind of like, how do you, for me at least, it's how do I find, like, are there values that are higher than the ones that I think are my values right now, and which ones should I choose to follow?
She said that the best way to do research is do the research like you are the person that's trying to disprove your research. So you're trying to, like,
You like that?
find all your loopholes and do that research.
Hey, we're on the subway on the way to the congressional offices to interview Congressman John Lewis. Pretty excited about that. SN just got a call that he's in jail right now for I think it was some kind of civil protest for Darfur. Just pretty excited. We don't know if he's going to be here, but we're sincerely hoping he is, because this kind of thing is huge.
Thank you very much for being here. Sorry that I'm running a little late, but I just got out of jail. Just 7 of us were arrested at the embassy of Sudan today, protesting what is going on there and trying to sensitize and educate more American and people around the world and put pressure on our government to do more, and the United Nations and others, really, to stop the killing, the mass murder, the raping, and really put a mind to genocide.
Matt pointed out the back of John Lewis's head, and I saw him from like halfway across the building, and I thought, oh, is that really John Lewis? And I yelled to him across the building, and he turned around, and I was able to run up to him, and I got to meet him individually. And for only about 5-10 minutes, I was able to talk to him individually, and right then I knew that this trip was worth it.
First one was a morning breakfast interview at this awesome swanky venue called Cosmos Club. I mean, you're walking into a mansion to have breakfast. That's all I can say about it. And we interviewed Ray Suarez from the Lehrer NewsHour there.
When I was in South Africa, I met a woman named Rebecca Matlu, who was an entrepreneur. And to be a black woman entrepreneur in South Africa is not always the easiest road. She had rented a shipping container, those big rectangular metal boxes that you see on ships that move everything around the world. And she opened a store in a shipping container. She sold sheep parts every day. She would go before the sun was up, buy from a middleman, bring the sheep parts in a styrofoam insulated container, and sell them. And then when she ran out of stock for the day, she would close the store. So I asked her, well, gee, you know, if you could get more sheep parts every day, could you sell them? And she said, oh, absolutely. But the problem is, I can't get more because I can't get a refrigerator. And I can't get a refrigerator because I can't get credit. And I can't get credit because I have no credit history. And I have no collateral. So when I walk into a bank and I say, I would like to borrow $300 to buy a freezer, they tell me that it's impossible to lend me any money because I have nothing to show in case I default on the loan. And here was the predicament of her country writ large. There was a developed world economy sitting side by side and rubbing up against a developing world economy every day. She had to play by this set of rules that were totally irrelevant to her existence. Collateral? The woman woke up in a village every morning and walked several miles to that shipping container. She didn't get in her SUV, drop the kids off at school, and then head to her sheep parts distributor business. I mean, she was kind of making it up as she went along, but she could be richer. She could be richer and then, in turn, spending more money in her town, but for the lack of this $300. It was one of those things that it's a voila moment where everything becomes immediately apparent when she explains herself, because there were hundreds of thousands of Rebeccas scattered all across southern Africa. I put this story on the radio, and an appliance salesman in Pretoria called, a white guy, who told me he had been listening to the radio and heard the story, and as long as Rebecca had electricity, she was going to have her freezer.
One thing that he really cared about was how there's a big rising opposition between the two parties.
They've all acknowledged that there is this partisanship and how it's increasing. It's been increasing through the past. Like, everyone knows it's there, but they don't address it. Some people have their own separate little agendas, but it seems like it's so obvious to everyone. It's just the elephant in the room. And wouldn't that make it easier to just bring it on the table as something that they need to fix?
Well, everybody says it. Everybody acknowledges it. You're right. I mean, you can't find members of Congress that won't say, at least privately, that the situation is very bad. And people who have served a long time or been around the city and Congress a long time will probably also say almost unanimously it's never been worse. On the other hand, what to do about it? Well, the Congress used to have, for a few years back, civility meetings. They actually went off to Hershey, Pennsylvania or someplace to a conference center, brought their families, and tried to be nice to each other, both parties. And it got to be, I guess, too much work or something, but because it kind of faded away.
You also want to be able to, shake hands and go on about your business afterwards. I mean, I make that a very personal commitment that we're fighting over a specific issue. And, your host, Sam Farr, and I, there may be some given issue that we disagree vigorously with one another on. And yet, tomorrow, or this afternoon, when we're doing the Agri-Probes bill, we may be shoulder to shoulder trying to have federal agricultural policy better reflect American agriculture instead of all going to wheat, corn, rice, and soybeans, recognizing, the specialty crops and things that tie our districts together. So, I think it's very important that you be, that you have your facts, that you understand the information to make your point on the floor, but you don't ever personalize it.
He was talking about back in the old days with Tip O'Neill, they would have baseball games between the Democrats and the Republicans, and they'd be friends. And now people just fly in for their votes, and so there's not a real bond between the parties, and I think he really cares that there's a problem.
We wrote legislation in conference or in subcommittee when I was a young member. We'd take off our coats, roll up our sleeves, fight like hell, say some appalling bad things to each other, and when it was all done, we would get up, shake hands, and walk out with our arms around each other as good friends. That doesn't happen anymore. And you will find, if you look at the votes, that the votes will be straight party line votes. Absolutely straight party line votes. That is the wrong way for the nation's business to be done.
And it should never be about the individual. And this institution could use some more of that.
Hi, I'm Daniel.
Hey.
So we've met several women, such as Melanne and Elise Nelson, who, like yourself, work for the advancement of other people in politics. And I found that many women leaders have a tendency to work in collaborative and supportive roles as opposed to taking leadership positions in the spotlight. Do you think that there's a way that women are raised in our society that leads them into supportive rather than leading roles? And how can women use the asset of being collaborative workers and still serve in needed national leadership positions?
God, what a good question, and a hard question too. Well, yeah, I mean, I think, for a long time, women weren't expected to be the leaders. I mean, look at so many other countries. Women are still in so many countries expected to sort of be in the background and not to be in the limelight. And I think that's really changing in America, where women now, I'm sure everybody at this table feels that you could be a leader. If that's what you choose, you certainly have the ability to get there. I think that most men that I talk to think that the political system would be a better place, or maybe the country would be a better place, if you had more of a diversity of opinion in the leadership. If it wasn't just, men and women do think differently. People who are 40 and people that are 20 do think differently. And if you just have more opinions coming into decisions, that it'll be better for everybody.
First of all, very basically, I think it's a no-brainer that if you have men and women, let's say 50-50, in a lot of countries there are more women than men, especially where there have been wars, etc. And you write off the 50% from the get-go because they're women, so they really can't participate in the formal economy of their country, and they really can't sit at the table and help govern the country. You're going to have problems. You don't need scientific research to prove that. But today we have got research in volumes from the World Bank, from the United Nations, from the World Economic Forum that shows very dramatically that if women don't fully participate in the economies of their countries, in the governance of their countries, there's going to be more corruption, there's going to be more poverty, there's going to be less progress. The single best investment a country can make, and that we can make in terms of our social development, is to invest in a girl's education. Because when you educate a girl, you educate a family, you educate a community. And all of the data shows there's better nutrition in that family, there's less disease, there'll be family planning practices, the mothers will have a better sense of how to support the family, etc. So it's a single best investment that can be made.
This is where you really get to find out who you are and what you can do. And how do I stay positive, and how do I grab an experience even though I'm not quite, gee, I'd rather be a little bit more pepped up, or gee, I wish, it was the only interview of the day, or, but you're in there and it's like opportunity is there and you grab it. What I loved at the end of the last interview was a bunch of you were bounced up and you were right there with her.
What are your greatest achievements that have been derived from self-reflection?
That's a deep question. I think my greatest achievements from self-reflection are things no one will know about but me. It's the stuff that you don't get awards for, that you don't get grants for, that you don't get recognition for. It's the stuff that you know is hardest for you and that you've somehow been able to overcome or accomplish. I think raising my daughter is probably one of the most important things that I'm doing right now. Because my life is pretty hectic at the Tahrir Justice Center, I have to set aside moments for self-reflection. And to do it ritually is pretty important so that we don't miss those chances and let life fly by without pausing.
The question is, who are we? Who are you? You. I mean, that's the question we have to be asking. In any situation. It's not about the people with whom we disagree. It's about looking within oneself and asking, what can I do to make this a better world? No one's stopping any of us from doing that. We disempower ourselves when we focus our attention on what someone in power authority is doing or not doing. That can be informative, that can help excite our passions, but the truth of the matter is, the fundamental question is not them, whoever they are, it's who am I? What do I stand for? What do I want to accomplish? How do I want to make a contribution to the world? These are the questions that every person ought to be asking. Now, it's so easy to focus on a president who we disagree with. Wrong discussion. Our discussion should be focused on what do we envision What do we want to create? How can we make this a better world? How can we use our talents and abilities to do that? And so when you do that, you're creating your own hope. And you're giving others hope as well. And you're giving yourself a sense of your own potency and power to change the outcome. Because every one of us can do that. The only reason we lose hope is when we fail to recognize how powerful we really are.
Since he tends to be somewhat of an idealist, and he pushes many issues even though they don't seem like the real practical ones. Like he wanted a Department of Peace, and he pushes these things because he believes in them. And I asked him how he does that, how he works through these issues without being pushed aside as an idealist. And he told me immediately, it doesn't matter what other people think of me. Only if you listen to those things, then you create your own helplessness. You give power away to them rather than just keeping the power within you.
And so we're at an important moment here. It's about who we are as a country. People need to become visible in stating their intention of the kind of world we want. Because that world we want is an extension of our hearts. It's an extension of our dreams. It's a world we call forward and create from our intentions. And if we don't want that kind of world, then we have to say the kind of world we want, and we have to act on that. And this is particularly important for young Americans.
It just was really powerful to be sitting with this man who pushes for what he believes in, even though others may throw it aside, and he is making change. He really affected our group, and even if that's just 23 people, that's 23 people who will lead their lives slightly different because of him and his views.
And then the other story, I think, is that same trip, and sort of an emotional roller coaster. I went to this. I had the previous month was International Women's Day, and International Women's Day is a big deal in Russia, and it's a huge holiday. So for this command post I'd been covering, they would never let me stay overnight, which is when all the action occurred, when they really got shot at and stuff, and the insurgents would come out in the field. And I kept begging him, let me stay overnight. So I was with my camera woman, Margaret Moth, and Margaret and I went down to this shtab, and I'd forgotten it was International Women's Day, and I used to let the troops use my satellite phone to call relatives, their mothers, whatever. So I came by and I said, does anybody need the phone? And can I stay, my usual question, can I stay overnight? And they said, oh, no, the colonel's coming, we have a present for you. Spraznikum, it's International Women's Day, and I forgot about that. So the colonel comes out, and again, we're in a war zone in the market. He's got like these two dead, tired Kardashians in his hand. He said, we heard you were in town, and we went, and we appreciate that you've been covering, what we've done, and we got you these carnations. So they handed them to me, Spraznikum, and I was like, well, if you really want to make my International Women's Day, you'll let me stay over. So I did stay, and in the end, we hardly lifted the camera because they were talking to us. Really, Margaret didn't speak Russian, but we were just sort of fascinated listening to these guys' stories, and they were talking really honestly about this was their Vietnam. They were really concerned about the horrors people had, seen and perhaps engaged in, and what that was going to do to a whole generation of Russian men. I mean, there was very philosophical conversations about the future of their country and the impact of this war. But two of the most articulate guys, were leaving the following month. And we're so excited. We're telling them about their families, and they're showing me pictures of their kids. And one of them is an older guy. And so the next month, when I'd come back, I saw the people leaving from Samashki, and I went to the shtab, and I said, so those guys left last week, right? They went out, and so have you heard from them yet? You want to call them on the phone, because, and aren't they in Nizhny? And this guy says, oh, you didn't hear? And he's like, let me go get the colonel. And I'm thinking, what's going on? And they all were like looking down, and the colonel comes out, and he said, they tripped a mine on the way to the airport. Oh. They were all killed. So, but they were 18, one of them. So it's like your age. Imagine. So he thought he was out. So, sorry. So I think that day was like, you know, the elation of these people having survived a war and sort of finally getting out. And then this kid. Sorry. So, but you know, I mean, that's the part about war. You just can't, you know, you never know. All these people, you know, they're all sort of innocently drawn into it. And these soldiers are, no, thank you. These soldiers, you know, they don't know why they're there. You know, half of those guys, they were just kids, you know, who were drawn into this thing. They were conscripts. I mean, in Russia, it's forced, you know, it's forced conscription, so anyway. Sorry. But other questions?
I was wondering if there are any situations such as genocide where nonviolence may be an impractical response, and what are the limitations to the nonviolent approach to life, and how do you deal with that?
I happen to believe that the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolent action is one of those immutable principles that you cannot deviate from the philosophy and the discipline of nonviolence. If you want a world at peace with itself, if you want the beloved community, if that is the goal, if that is the end, then the way must be one of love and one of nonviolence. Someplace along the way, I think some great countries, some powerful countries such as America, or some other force must come along and say, enough is enough. We're not going down that road. We're going to teach people a different way. And just get out there, believe it and live it. When you accept nonviolence simply as a technique, as a tactic, it becomes like a faucet. You can turn it on and you can turn it off. That's why during the 60s, many of us accepted nonviolence as a way of life, as a way of living.
My favorite interview, or one of my favorites, was with Congressman John Lewis, who I'm sure all of you know marched in the Civil Rights Movement with Martin Luther King Jr. And he was really powerful, and lots of the congressmen speak of him as like the heart and the soul of the Congress, because he's never free from it, you know, just the whole nonviolence is so rooted in him. And throughout the interview, he kept saying, I will not become bitter, I will not hate. And it's just so powerful coming from a man who, you know, has been physically beaten, to think, if he cannot hate, what reasons do we have to hate?
What was really memorable for me was the song that we sang on Sunday at Margot Foster's house, because I hadn't really thought that much about what the words meant to me, or what it really meant to the whole group altogether. And then in every interview and in every free moment where I had to just hum the song to myself, it would mean more and more.
From a distance, the world looks blue and green, and snow-capped mountains bright.
From a distance. We have a general closer question that we ask to all of our new viewers. It's, what is the most important piece of advice that you can give us with all of your life experience?
My advice to you would be very simple. When you see something that is not right, when people have been put down because of their race, their color, or their nationality, or whatever the reason, you must speak up. You must speak out.
Get involved and stay involved.
And you're already doing it, just to be involved.
Get involved with community.
I would say involve yourself and participate. You don't have to run for Congress or run for president or anything like that. All you got to do is to participate.
Songs of hope, playing songs of peace. They're the songs of everyone. And God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance.
And also my belief that I can actually make a difference, that these are things that not only do I really care about, but that I can really help. And just because I care about them, like, that gives me the power to do something about it.
Within us, we have a power to create something.
From a distance,
I think that's part of the power of this trip, is the power of listening and the power of intention.
Looking around at the group, everyone was really touched by it because everyone understood the words and got something out of it.
For 10 days, you're pretty much in a continuous memorable moment.
it's the hope of hopes. It's the love of loves. It's the heart of everyone. It's the hope of hopes. It's the love of loves. It's the heart of everyone. And God is watching us. God is watching us. God is watching us from a distance. Oh, God is watching us.
Can't even imagine what you could create just as a group, you know, from a school in Santa Cruz, and you know, watching. I mean, there's no limits. So don't limit yourself. Don't let anyone else limit you.